We are live.
Oh, crikey, I've forgotten the script. I'll take this out in editing. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story, once a week. I'm Gerald.
I'm Rami.
And I'm Anais.
This week's story, And of Clay We Are Created, is a fictionalized account of a true story. If you haven't had a chance to read the story yet, pause the podcast, read the story, and then come back. In 1985, after being dormant for 69 years, the Nevado del Gruiz stratovolcano erupted with very little warning for local people. It killed nearly 23,000. Isabel Allende's story features a young girl who was trapped in the clay that buried the towns. She became somewhat of a celebrity around the world. Allende renames the girl and writes the story from the perspective of a journalist who attempts to save her.
Okay.
Just
from the summary, I have questions. But overall, what did everyone think of the story?
I liked it.
Okay. Rami?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of it, because have we read a story like this before where it's a fictionalized account of a true event?
Don't remember.
I don't know. But it's funny because overall, I liked it too. I wouldn't say I'm absolutely in love with it, but I definitely liked it and would recommend it to other people. But when Gerald first suggested the story, he's like, wait, it's nonfiction. But it's a different name. The girl's name in the real life story is Omaira Sanchez, not Azucena. And I don't think she says it's necessarily Colombia. In fact, I think Allende's stories mostly take place in Chile. So I'm wondering if it's sort of inspired by that, but fictional enough that it is still true fiction.
I think so. I think the actual detail of the story and the journalist's background and what the journalist does and his actions and his thoughts and of his girlfriend also, I think is makes the story more of a fiction than a non-fiction for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's also set in a greater anthology, the stories of Eva Luna. So the narrator is supposed to be Eva Luna, who occurs throughout all of the other stories. And I think in some of the other stories, Rolf Carley is her lover as well. So these are characters that are also appearing in other fictions.
Oh, okay.
I think that changes things.
Hmm.
So let's start, I guess, with the themes. What did you guys think the story was about?
I think that's where I have trouble because to me it's just I think there's a number of themes in the story that aren't that are just, it's like they just appear in the story, like the unwillingness of people to come to the aid of this girl, and everything's delayed, and they can't get the equipment they need. So there's all this sort of I don't know how you describe it. The idea that we're appearing to help people, but this one specific person gets no help at all. So a sort of official intransigence or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Though I didn't necessarily read it that way. Did you, Rami, that it was people's unwillingness to help, or did you have a different read on it?
Not so much unwillingness, but helplessness. And I guess two big themes that stood out are just love and loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because for me, I felt like in my reading of it, it wasn't so much that people didn't want to help; it's that it was hard to prioritize. Like they had spent some time there, they needed resources elsewhere, and this case isn't going to resolve quickly. There's other survivors we need to tend to, so it's just what happens when there's scarcity, and there's a sort of a triage that has to happen, and in that triage, she gets bumped down the list because of how everything else has played out, which is really tragic. So Rami mentioned the theme of love, which I agree with, and but love in what sense? So it's not necessarily like a romantic love. So can you expand on that a bit, Rami?
I guess the connection or bond between the girl who was trapped in the story, Azucena, and the person who was attempting to rescue her, Rolf Carly.
What would you guys say was like a consequence of that? So like that's the part that I'm still trying to wrap my head around a little bit, and I don't want to like overlead because I also do some research, which helps.
Yeah, I think over, because that was the first person that he'd seen, that Rolf had seen, and he'd sort of focused in on her. He created a bond between him and her, and he realized that she was helpless. She was trapped. She couldn't get out. So he knew that someone had to be there. He couldn't just leave her and then film and interview other things going on around. He felt he had to stay with this girl, because she was all alone. There was no one else to help her.
And that was significant because he's done so many disaster reportings, battles, other natural disasters, and he always has this distance. There's that one line about him that I liked, which was that his exploits as a reporter were a stratagem for taking refuge behind a lens to test whether reality was more tolerable from that perspective. So he was always very emotionally distant in all other assignments, and this time he got sort of drawn into Azucena's plight.
And do you think that's because it was one single person, so he wasn't just viewing the whole catastrophe in like a sweeping wide angle, but there was just this one girl, and it became very personal, and he learned about her, her history, so he made that connection with her as a single person.
Yeah, but I would argue there's always a single person you could do that with in any situation. There was a lot of other survivors. There was that line about how they were lining up like specters for to get food. And he's been in a lot of situations where there's probably always going to be many people that you can latch onto. And I think the reason why he latched onto her had a bit more to do with his history. Or maybe sometimes it's inexplicable why this was the time that something broke through to you, right? I think we've all experienced that in our own lives, where all of a sudden there's just one thing that sets off something deep within you, and why was it that time is harder to answer.
Yeah, because there didn't seem to be any sort of thing going on in his personal life that suddenly brought, a need to bond with people or a need to help individuals. It just seemed when he set off, his lover just sort of said, off he goes, on another one of these long distance things.
Yeah, an assignment.
Yeah, assignments. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, but the thing is, we also don't know what's going on internally because everything is told through the perspective of the narrator, his lover, Eva Luna, who's watching this through screen. So we're not even with him as he's having this conversation with Azucena. We don't actually know what he's thinking. It's only what this person is watching and what he tells her afterwards as she's reporting this. So it's like we're pretty removed from what's actually happening with him, and we have to sort of just guess based on what he's been willing to tell her.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it is strange that there is something that's very different about this one case, isn't there? That perhaps he saw the helplessness of her, the fact she couldn't get out, the fact that she was, there was nobody else to help her.
There is a bit of a unique horror in how she survived, which is most people, not most, but in many cases, you die more or less immediately, or you survive and are more or less mobile, or you're trapped, but they can get you out pretty quickly. And if you're trapped for that long, it seems to inspire a different level of sympathy and empathy.
Yeah, and in that Chilean mining disaster a few years ago, because it went on a long time, the interest from, even from this country and from worldwide became greater and greater, and people got more and more involved. Whereas if they'd been trapped and killed or trapped and rescued, it'd be, oh yeah, that happened, we move on.
Yeah. And there was that line about how I think hit her age came into play as well. She was at a perfect age that had him reflect on what he was living through at that age.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. One thing I mean, coming back to what I said about not being willing to help. There's a piece where it says that on the third day, the president visited the area in his tailored safari jacket to confirm this was the worst catastrophe of the century. It keeps on saying there's nothing it actually does to help the people. The looters are going to be shot on sight, dealing with the corpses, the solemn mass for the souls of the victim, all that sort of stuff. But there was nothing to actually help, especially the trapped girl.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's true of the president, who's politicizing this, and it's an opportunity for him to be there. But there's another line about the doctors who had to resign themselves to amputating limbs without anesthesia, but were begging for painkillers and antibiotics. And I think the first responders were more in like a triage mode, prioritizing what they need to do. But definitely the political side of it, there is a bit of an unwillingness.
Yeah.
There's a different set of priorities.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking when I did some research on this is part of an anthology called The Stories of Eveluna, and apparently there's a theme throughout all of the stories that has to do with self-discovery through love. And once you see that in the greater context of an anthology that's exploring that, then I think that theme, I feel like that theme, it's there, but it doesn't shine very strongly on its own, and it's in this greater work where then it becomes a bit more clear.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting that Allende's used this particular thing to this catastrophe to tell that story in that series of stories.
Yeah. And there was another more sort of surface story that's right in the title, which is "And of clay we are created." So there's a bit of a comment about sort of the fragility of being human, and the powerfulness of nature. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Rami looks very focused.
Thoughtful.
Yeah.
He's not convinced
I'm
yet.
still trying to make sense of how I'm feeling about this story.
Wow.
With respect to the fact that it's covering true events, and whether I think I would have appreciated it more had it been completely fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm kind of grappling with that.
Does it matter? Does it? Can you?
I think
you not?
it does, because I feel like when we rate it, I think I would have rated it higher had it been completely fictionalized.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. But the thing is, for me, it is fiction enough. It's just that because it's based on an event that's so well known that happened just 4 years before this was published, because it's so well known, everyone's like, there it is, there it is. But I feel like a lot of fiction that we read is in some way interpretation or a mask of something that happened in real life to someone. A lot of authors are drawing from the real experiences. We just don't know about it because it wasn't all over the news.
Yeah. I think I don't know. It didn't bother me at all that this actually happened, or sort of happened. There was a trapped girl and a journalist tried to help her. I just treated it as fiction and carried on. So I liked that.
Mm-hmm. What did you guys think about the fact that Rolf? So he's a journalist, was an Austrian Jew. He was a concentration camp survivor, and his dad was an abusive parent who beat him and his sister, and everything else that happened. So there's something about our tone. Like if you listen to how we're discussing the story, we're all like, yeah, we see it. Yeah, it's good. But none of us are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I think there's a degree to which it almost it just feels like it sort of has like the trappings of like, okay, we need to have a down his luck guy who becomes unstuck and unmoored by this moment. What's like the biggest sob story? Concentration camp survivor abuse. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like it almost feels like ticking boxes in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're all sort of speaking about this, like, yeah, I was all there, it was good, but we're not necessarily moved.
No, and I don't think that there's very little depth to the story for me, and maybe that's me viewing it from the perspective it being an actual event. So maybe I think if you wanted to write an account of what happened actually, then this is a great way of doing it, and great way of having, just the very small number, sort of ignore the whole catastrophe of the thousands of people dying, and focus in on one and two people. So I think this is a great way of describing that, the sort of horrors of that event. But yeah, it's kind of hard to get that out of your head once you know.
Mm-hmm. And you say it's a great way to describe it, and it's, I would say, because the prose is very vivid, it's very visual. What did you guys make of the prose?
Yeah, very good. I liked
Yeah,
it very much.
well written.
Yeah, it's it's a sort of mid-range for just over 4,000 words. So for us, it's a mid-range short story, but just the writing's really nice. It just rolls on by.
Mm-hmm.
It's lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I hear what you say. Where it's just like, it's a really nice, vivid account, and I'm mostly horrified by being trapped for 3 days in pain, getting rained on, and then dying that way. Like, what a way to go. And then the main thing that I'm supposed to be focusing on, which is the Rolf Carley thing, it's like a secondary thing to me. Like, for some reason, maybe because it's the over-fictional part of it, maybe if it was about the real journalist who photographed the real Mayra Sanchez and what he went through, I would have cared more. But when it feels like you're ticking boxes, it's just like, oh, concentration camp survivor, abusive dad. I'm like, well, this it's not that those people don't exist, but it's just like, it feels like you're doing the things that tick off the sympathy bells in the reader. Like, oh, here we are, we're doing, so it just feels a bit like, I guess, too manipulative. Maybe that's the word.
I think it's almost like it's clumsy writing. It's just hitting you with a hammer with the issues.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use clumsy so much as just like the character just doesn't feel real enough for me to be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels, like. Yeah.
And it's quite hard because he's the protagonist. And yet you've got this young girl who is the real protagonist, or is the real center of the story. So it's kind of difficult to then focus on him when the story's about her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The story isn't about her, but the real story is about her. The whole focus of the story is about her and being trapped. And Andy's tried to build a story about him from that, and maybe that's sort of tugging.
Yeah, and I think it just felt a little overly manipulative when you start seeing like what are the demons he's wrestling with. It just feels like, felt a little tropey. Like, got it. Like, and maybe it's because we're reading this in 2018 and we've just seen so much of that it's like, maybe, I mean, this was still 1989. There was probably still a lot of that, but like maybe there's some degree to which it's just like we've moved on from what's like the worst, you know what I'm saying? Like, not the worst, but just like we expect something a little different.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. But there was one thing that I wish the story was about. It was right at the end, which is when the narrator is jealous of Azucena a little bit. She gets a little jealous that, not romantically, but that Azucena is the one who gets Rolf to sort of confront this and not be putting up a facade. And that I thought was really interesting. And that was just a few sentences. And that, I think the reason it was so interesting for me was because I recognize it. I understand it. I get why she's a little jealous, because she wants to be so important to Rolf that she's the one who helps him overcome this. It's not a romantic jealousy at all. And yet I still find it distasteful, right? Like, it's still just like, oh, you can't You can't be jealous of this 13-year-old who's stuck in mud. But I get it.
Yeah. I think it's because he changed, didn't he? So when he returned, he watched endless videos and trying to find some way he could have saved her, and it obviously affected him quite deeply. And I think she felt shut out because of that, because it was all about him and the girl, and their life had been changed because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think she just wanted to be the cataclysm and not have someone else be the cataclysm more than anything. Because you're saying it's because of the after effect of it, but this is the line that made me think of like that she wanted to be the inspiration, which was, I was there when she told him that in all her 13 years, no boy had ever loved her. And Rolf assured her that he loved her more than he could ever love anyone, more than he loved his mother, more than his sister, more than all the women who had slept in his arms, more than he loved me, his life companion, who would have given anything to be trapped in that well in her place, who would have exchanged her life for Azucena's. So that's the part that makes me think, like, she just wanted to be the person who moves him, like, to the point where, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she wanted to inhabit the role that Azucena played in his life.
Could that have... I read that as just stemming from pity for Azucena, and for example, if someone is sick or something, you might say, oh, I wish it was me rather than you, type of thing.
I don't know. I think it's... Yeah, it does seem a little bit more than that when you read that section again.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, yeah.
My note was like that, I get it. I sympathize with what she's saying, and I still find it distasteful. And I wonder if this is sort of like the distasteful part of humanity. Like, we can recognize it and we look away a little embarrassed, like, oh, girl, don't. I get it, but don't say it out loud. Swallow it. You swallow that deep inside, and you never, like, it's an ugly feeling, but I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's quite interesting what she says there. It's yeah, that's.
I wish it was about that. I wish it was about the narrator's feelings about this thing that she's been watching on all these screens obsessively, because she's pretty obsessed. Like, she wants the clearer images. She wants to find the precise moment where he changes. I think that would have been a more interesting story.
Yeah.
I'm sort of talking myself into a lower rating, which is unfortunate because I walked away from it still liking it and thinking people should read it.
Yeah, and the bit where she writes, given anything to... Yeah, loved her more than he loved me, his life companion, who would have given anything to be trapped in that well in her place, would have exchanged her life for Azucena's. That's a strange thing to write.
She's jealous. She's jealous. And not romantically. It's
right.
Just she wants to be the most important thing that had this effect on him, that broke the dam, that broke the barrier. She wanted to be that person who saved him.
Wow.
That would be good.
That's very strange, isn't it? That's a strange thing. Yeah.
But can you understand it?
Not really. I just think it's like quite an extreme step, isn't it? To wish that you were trapped in that hole and facing death in order to get a reaction out of your lover. It just seems a bit strange.
I don't know if it's quite that literal. If she really wished she would rather die, but I think more than anything is she wishes she was that person who had done it. Like, that's the way that I read it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. You kind of get it, but also don't say that. But again, that's the whole point of short stories, where people confess to things that you're not supposed to confess. Yeah. So that's why we like it.
It's true.
That was my favorite part of the whole story, and it's like 4 sentences.
Yeah.
It's a little dark.
That was very, very dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Imagine a whole novel exploring that.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, crikey! Yeah, that's. Yeah, I just thinking about that now. It's it'd be. And I think you'd have to be female to write it to understand those feelings and get those across. Because I don't.
And I think because there probably is something a little gendered here, which is like the way that for centuries it's been very much where the idea that the woman is sort of like helping the guy fight through inner demons and improve and everything like that. Like that a really good woman worth admiring is the one who like makes the man the best version of himself. You know what I mean? Like that's something that goes back a lot of centuries. It doesn't really flip the other way. It's not about making the woman the best woman ever, that a good man is a man that does that, right? So I think that's the gendered part of it, where it's like, because she loves him so much, and the way this is supposed to play out is that she's the one who has this effect that no one else possibly ever can. I think that's what it is. It's like that role was taken from her.
Good point. Yeah. I think I
I
can
think
see
it's
that.
gendered and it'd be a good novel.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
I know,
Away
right?
you go.
I think that's why that was my favorite part, but that wasn't the whole story.
Yeah. No. So yeah, I suppose in that respect, there's it's almost like it's a little confused. It's almost like it's trying to, it's ticking boxes, isn't it? It's trying to fulfill more of a role than a short story in that position can.
I wonder if Eveluna in the other stories you see more of this. Like I wonder if in a greater body of work that comes through more.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a shortish kind of story. Like you were saying, it didn't have a lot of depth. Is there anything else anyone wanted to add?
Rami's thinking.
No.
Do you know how you feel about it yet?
Well, yeah, and I'm kind of acknowledging my feelings that, like I said, I think I would have given it a higher rating if I had known it wasn't based on publicized events.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do ratings then.
Well, I'll start. Yeah, my rating's gone down a little. 4.5 because I did enjoy the story.
Okay, Rami.
I'll give it a 4, but I should add that I guess one advantage of basing it on a real event is that it also draws more attention to it. So I had never heard of it, despite the fact that I guess this was an international kind of crisis. But yeah, so that's good.
Yeah.
Also, the picture of the girl Omaira Sanchez in the Colombia story, the real story. What a picture! The eyes, striking.
It's really frightening. It's horrible, but amazing.
Yeah. So I'm giving it a 4 as well. Yeah, I think I talked myself down into it a little bit. The prose is really great, but I don't know if that saves it for me. Like, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, a short story's got to have several facets, hasn't it? And yes, it's got to be interesting and readable, and you know the writing's got to be good. But yeah, there's got to be something a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So it's time for game. Woohoo! Before we do that, what are you submitting for next time?
I'm submitting The Drowned Giant for J.G. Ballard. Still trying to get that in for Todd.
Rami?
I'm submitting William and Mary by Roald Dahl.
Okie doke. Okay, so what's the quiz going to be about? Is it going to be about Colombia or Chile or children or
Natural
of course
disasters?
It's about volcanoes.
Oh, God.
Okay.
You're gonna learn stuff here, I'll tell you. Okay, so so on my screen it's Annie to the left and Rami to the right. So we'll do that. It's quite a short quiz, multiple choice. Anais, what is a dormant volcano? Is it, and you have to listen carefully, is it one that erupts occasionally, one that's not erupted in recorded history, one that will never erupt again, or one that erupted recently?
One that hasn't erupted in recorded history?
Yay! Correcto. Well done. Rami, where in the world are 3/4 of the world's active volcanoes? Are they on volcanic islands, on the tops of mountains, at volcanic hotspots, or underwater?
Underwater.
Wonder what you know about volcanoes, you two. Well done. Anise, what is volcanic lava? Is it magma that erupts onto the Earth's surface? Is it molten rock deep in the Earth's crust? Is it ash that's spewed out onto the Earth's surface? Or is it gas clouds created by volcanoes? Lava.
What was the difference between the first two? Magma onto their surface. What was the second one?
Molten rock deep in the Earth's crust.
The first one, the one that has to come out then.
Yay! This is blimey. I need a harder quiz. Rami, what is a hotspot? Is it a vent in the ground from which hot gas and steam escape? Is it areas where magma breaks through the Earth's crust? Is it a crater created by hot magma or lava mixing with water? Or is it hot lava?
The vent.
Wrong.
Was it the third one?
No, it was the second one. It's areas where magma actually breaks through the Earth's crust. So that's a hotspot. I didn't know that.
The third one's making a geyser when magma mixes with water or something.
Yeah. That's okay. So Anise, can you make it 3 out of 3? Which volcano is thought to be the loudest sound in modern history?
Okay.
Is it Krakatoa? Is it Mount Pelée? Is it Mount, and I was going to work out how to pronounce this, Eyjafjallajökull?
Ooh.
Or is it
that
Mount
Iceland?
That's in Iceland, yes. Or is it Mount St. Helens?
This is just good guess, I guess. Krakatoa?
3 out of 3. Well done.
Woo!
Which
This
means
is all for you, Todd.
well, I'm going to ask the questions anyway. Rami, see if you can finish a close second. Which volcano buried the ancient town of Pompeii in Italy? Is it Mount
Vesuvius?
God, you clever boy.
Yes.
It's Mount Vesuvius, 79 AD. Okay, well, I'm going to do the tie breaks anyway because they're interesting. How many active volcanoes are there in the world? And it's a number between 800 and 2,000. Anise. Active volcanoes, 800 and 2,000.
1,200.
And Rami?
Wait, what's 800 and 2,000 in reference?
That's the number is between 800 and 2,000. So you have to guess.
I thought it was all one number. 800 and 2,000. Active volcanoes, 1,500.
Is correct, you see. Very good.
Is it
It was 1,500. 1,500 active volcanoes. That's pretty scary.
There was just Costa Rica had like so many.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so what are we reading next week?
We are reading The Drowned Giant by J.G. Ballard. But before you go, take refuge from the harsh realities of life in the comment section at literaryroadhouse.com. While you're there, let us know what you think of the story. And don't watch us longingly from a distance, obsessing over every word, as I'm sure you all are. Get in touch by sending us a tweet at LitRoadhouse. Want to explore the fragility of the human body and depth of the human spirit in long form? Of course you do! Join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, a monthly show that discusses full fiction novels. Also, we need podcast rescue tools to lift this show to greater podcast heights. Support our efforts at patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with the angry volcano in your life. Until next time, read a good story.